Hello and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, hi, you're very welcome. This is Reading the Past and I'm Dr. Kat. And a number of you have reached out to me in the comment section, on social media and via email to ask me to talk about the curse of Macbeth and where the idea of it might have come from. Now, while I was familiar with the idea that there was a cursed play by William Shakespeare, that we shouldn't use the word Macbeth in a theatre, or in fact in front of some theatre professionals, and instead we should refer to the Scottish play, I wasn't completely sure of where the idea of this curse came from, or if it had any merit, and so I wanted to look into it. And while I was doing that, I thought about the other superstitions that we might hold to, and where do some of those come from? So today I will certainly be talking about the so-called curse of Macbeth, but I also want to look into other superstitions and think about the potential sources or origin points for those. I hope you'll enjoy. The first one is a heavy hitter, a superstition that I think we're probably all familiar with. The idea that the number 13 is unlucky. But where does that come from? Some suggest that the origin for this idea comes from the fact that 12 is considered to be a perfect number. After all, each day is made up of two 12-hour halves. The solar calendar is divided into 12 months. Does this perhaps account for the suspect nature of the number 13? On the other hand, Norse lore tells of the introduction of evil being caused by Loki, the Norse god of mischief, deciding to arrive uninvited to dine in Valhalla at a table set for 12 other gods. His presence therefore disrupted the balance of the dinner party, and arguably the world. Similarly, Judas Iscariot, famous betrayer of Jesus Christ, was the 13th and final guest to arrive at the Last Supper. Why do some people insist on throwing spilt salt over their left shoulder? Is the spilling of salt unlucky because it was a valuable and useful commodity? Equally, is throwing it around a show of prosperity? Is it because Judas Iscariot, yes, him again, is believed by some to have knocked over the salt cellar at the Last Supper? Salt has long been recognised to be an effective preserving and cleansing agent. If you believe that bad luck has befallen you, the sort of bad luck perhaps that would make you spill an expensive commodity like salt, then maybe the devil is to blame. Of course, the devil will be found on your sinister or left side. In Latin, left is sinastrum, and he will of course also be behind you. Therefore, if you throw salt over your left shoulder, you may be able to blind the devil that is plaguing you and prevent his bad luck from following you any further. Next up is perhaps a more obscure one, but I remember quite distinctly as a child being told off for putting new shoes on a table, that it was bad luck, and I'd always wondered where that idea came from. I was quite surprised to find out that one suggestion had really nothing to do with the shoes being new or old. Shoes on the table were bad luck because it could be linked to the death of a family member. A miner's shoes were apparently placed on a table after his death, and in fact, this could have been how his family found out he was dead. So shoes on the table outside of these circumstances might be viewed as tempting fate. I think it's also worth remembering that many old shoes had their soles attached with nails. Perhaps this risks scratching the table they were being placed on, and maybe this would be even more pronounced of a risk if those shoes were new. Equally, putting shoes on the table, especially if they were new shoes, would be a fairly risky thing to have done, as it could have been pretty unhygienic. Why is it bad luck to open an umbrella indoors? Well, opening an umbrella indoors on the one hand is not a very sensible or safe idea. It may result in you breaking valuable or sentimental objects, and that could feel pretty unlucky, as it might generate conflict in your home. Perhaps this particular superstition originates in ancient Egypt. Of course, in ancient Egypt, the umbrella was intended to shield from the sun rather than the rain. Is it possible that opening an umbrella indoors might be viewed as an insult to the sun god, something that could bring divine punishment, and thus bad luck? If we stay with ancient Egypt, we might find the origin point for the superstition around crossing paths with a black cat. In ancient Egypt, cats were revered, so much so that it is said that killing one might be punished by death. Does this perhaps explain why crossing paths with any cat, black or otherwise, might have been viewed as bad luck by an ancient Egyptian? Anything could happen. You could trip and fall and crush the cat, and then you yourself could find your life forfeit. If this were indeed the punishment, then I think it's understandable that the ancient Egyptians might be keen to avoid cats in general. Perhaps the superstition around cats, and more specifically black cats, can be traced instead to the medieval period, the time when they became connected most explicitly with witchcraft. Some believed that the black cat was the witch's familiar, or even the witch themselves in animal form, a disguise they could put on so they could get to work on their nefarious deeds. Could it be that to avoid a black cat was to avoid the attentions of a witch or her familiar, and the potential bad luck that such attention could bring to you? Perhaps, however, there is a more logical explanation for this particular superstition. Is it possible that black cats are more invisible, particularly at night? Does that invisibility make them more prone to startling horses or even beasts of burden, and therefore causing accidents or injury? Imagine that a number of people that you knew had been thrown from their horse and injured, and every single one of them happened to mention that they had seen a black cat just before or just after. Might you, when you were out riding your horse, therefore be on the lookout for black cats? Perhaps even attempt to avoid crossing their path? Could this be where the superstition originates from? Why would people believe that breaking a mirror would bring you 7 years of bad luck? This particular superstition might be logical and understandable if we consider the cost of a mirror, particularly in the past. For example, if you were an apprentice or even a lady's maid, and you happened to break a mirror belonging to your employer, then bad luck would almost certainly follow. You could perhaps expect a period of unemployment that may last many years. However, it might also stem from the fact that the reflection you could find in the mirror was once believed to represent the soul. A smashed mirror would distort or fracture this image, potentially endangering that soul and therefore your luck. But why does the bad luck last 7 years? That feels like a somewhat arbitrary number to me. Well, that was until I looked into it, and I discovered that apparently the Romans believed that the body regenerated after 7 years. So with a new body, does that mean that your luck also comes back as well? Before we look at the Scottish play, I want to think about some of the superstitions that were culturally accepted but have now been lost to us. First and foremost, I want to look at witch marks. These fascinating signs and signifiers have been located in a number of historic properties. It's probably more appropriate to refer to them as ritual protection marks, because it is believed that they were intended to turn away evil in a variety of forms. A number of these ritual protection or witch marks have been found in properties that are now in the keeping and care of the National Trust. And they explain these marks, saying, in buildings they are found scratched into the stone, plaster and woodwork near potential points of ingress and egress, beside windows, doorways and fireplaces. They have been found in buildings dating from the medieval period up till the early 19th century. As fear of witches and the demonic ebbed away, the marks continue to be used to bring luck and protection. On this webpage, which I will of course be leaving linked in the description box, they also show examples of the kinds of witch marks they've found. Apparently the most common is this one, the daisy wheel. Another common mark they have found is the overlapping V's or Marian marks, so called because in these intertwined overlapping V letters we have the initials of the Virgin Mary, 2 V's making up an M. While these examples may be the most common shapes to have been found so far, the National Trust has found ritual protection marks in a variety of shapes. Pentagons, mazes, crosses, diagonal lines, and indeed many others, all of which seem to be performing the very same task, namely to protect a building and its inhabitants from the influence of evil, or to welcome good luck into their lives. It would also seem that over many centuries, old shoes have been secreted in the fabric of buildings. A number have been discovered during renovation and restoration work. Frequently, these shoes have been found in fairly similar locations to the so-called witch marks or ritual protection marks. The shoes that have been discovered were worn by men, women, and in remarkably large numbers, children. Presumably, at one time these shoes belonged to occupants of the home. The children's shoes may have been favoured because of the presumed purity of youth that was held by their wearer. However, it may also be explained by the fact that children will outgrow shoes, meaning that more children's shoes may be available within the home but no longer being worn and in use. Because shoes take on the shape of the foot of the wearer, they may be considered to be imbued with that person's essence or energy. As such, it was believed they could distract witches, demons, fairies, ghosts, and changelings. It was hoped that these supernatural entities might be drawn to the human essence or energy contained within the shoe and attack that, rather than the shoe's former owner. Glass and stoneware receptacles, such as Bartman or bearded man jugs, have been found buried in a variety of locations. Many have been found to contain a collection of very unusual objects. These are witch jars. They might contain any number of things: pins, iron nails, teeth, clippings of hair, lead shot, and, it is assumed, at one time, the urine of a person who was believed to have been afflicted by malevolent spellcasting. We think that it was believed that these witch jars could absorb the evil of malevolent spellcasting and reverse it, causing suffering to the spellcast themselves, while also protecting the original victim from further harm. Next up, and without further ado, as promised, we're going to be looking at the curse of Macbeth. One caveat though, as with the other superstitions that we've been looking at today, the fear surrounding William Shakespeare's play does not have one clear, defined origin point. We do have a lot of suggestions, and that is what I think is the most fascinating, and I hope that you're going to agree with that as well. Let's look at some ideas. One suggestion for the origin of this curse comes from the fact that Macbeth was the play that was known to be the one that would replace a show that wasn't doing well in the theatre. Macbeth was a fan favourite. If you were a performer in another show and you heard Macbeth being rehearsed while you were in the theatre, then that was a signal that your show wasn't doing well, that it was about to be pulled, and therefore that you were about to undergo the bad luck of losing your job. Equally, as it was such an incredibly popular play, Macbeth tended to have longer runs than other shows due to audience demand. The longer a show is being performed, the higher the chance there is of something going wrong during the performances. Macbeth is actually a dangerous play. It's full of fight sequences and special effects. There are simply a lot of things that can go wrong. The Royal Shakespeare Company offers the following explanations. According to folklore, Macbeth was cursed from the beginning. A coven of witches objected to Shakespeare using real incantations, so they put a curse on the play. Legend has it that the play's first performance, around 1606, was riddled with disaster. The actor playing Lady Macbeth died suddenly, so Shakespeare himself had to take on the part. I looked around to see if I could find any evidence to corroborate this event having taken place, and as yet I've had no luck. It didn't mean that it didn't happen, but I can find no evidence of the actor playing Lady Macbeth dying and Shakespeare taking on the part. Other rumoured mishaps include real daggers being used in place of stage props for the murder of King Duncan, resulting in the actor's death. The famous Astor Place riot in New York in 1849 was caused by rivalry between American actor Edward Forrest and English actor William Charles Macready, and it resulted in at least 20 deaths and over 100 injuries. Both Forrest and Macready were playing Macbeth in opposing productions at the time. This is interesting, no doubt. However, I do wonder if this is yet another case of evidence for the argument that correlation doesn't necessarily mean causation. We are also informed that other productions have been plagued with accidents, including actors falling off the stage, mysterious deaths, and even narrow misses by falling stage weights, which apparently happened to Laurence Olivier at the Old Vic in 1937. So you've committed the great faux pas. You're in the theatre talking to theatrical professionals and you forget to use the term the Scottish play, and instead you say Macbeth. How do you fix it? How do you break this curse? Well, here is the step-by-step instruction for doing just that. You must first exit the theatre, spin around 3 times, spit, curse, then knock on the theatre door to be allowed back in. Easy peasy. However, Dr. Ajna Chauhan from the Shakespeare's Birthplace Trust burst the bubble of the notion of a curse surrounding Macbeth by stating the following. It's all just a myth. In the 19th century, Macbeth was a particularly popular play, and some critics were getting fed up with it. One was Max Beerbohm, a cartoonist and critic. He made up a story that the actor playing Lady Macbeth in the first production had died. It was a parody of the way scholars take evidence from the period, of what George Bernard Shaw called, quote, bardology. But everyone believed it, and that's where the myth of bad luck began. But what do you think? I don't consider myself to be a massively superstitious person, but in the name of full disclosure, when I'm in a theatre or around theatre professionals, I don't refer to the play as Macbeth. Instead, I call it the Scottish play. But what do you do? As always, I'm looking forward to reading your conversation in the comments section, or you can find me over on social media. I'll be leaving links to my Instagram and Twitter in the description box. You can follow me there and we can continue this conversation. I do hope you've enjoyed this video and found it useful. If you did, then please let me know by hitting the thumbs up. Please also subscribe to this channel, and while you're there, hit the notification bell beside the subscribe button so that YouTube tells you when I've next uploaded. I hope you're going to have a great day whatever you're doing, and I look forward to speaking to you all in my next video. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye for now.